I ask this question to everybody, and I'm going to ask you the first question is right now in your life, so we can
Yeah.
get a little idea of where you're at. When you wake up in the morning,
Uh-huh.
what is it that just sets you on fire? Like what just lights up your heart for the day?
Oh my gosh. I am a very passionate person. I'm an Enneagram 8 with a 7 wings. So I'm very passionate, very intense. And I just find joy in all the little things. But the thing that sets me on fire is there's a couple of things. One, it's the ability to help people heal and come into that place for themselves. That sets me on fire
Yeah.
to be able to create space for people to do that. And then also just being able to be connected to the things that bring me joy. So I can find joy in the littlest things, but for me, it's being in my purpose. It's allowing myself the space to experience joy. So for me, that's like being out in nature, that's movement, that's being connected to my body, and that's really also connecting to others. So being able to connect with people in very deep and intentional ways are just some of the things that set me on fire. And my cats, they're pretty cute.
Yeah, I'm so glad you added your pets into that. That's cool.
Yes.
How many cats do you have?
I have 3, so I'm not quite crazy cat lady status, but it's
Uh,
borderline.
can we expect any of your cats to like come through the screen today and say hi, or is that?
Oh, you know what? They were going to, but I was like, no, we can't have that. It'll all become about the cats, and so they are outside.
So thank you for that answer. And so for people that are listening and not watching this, Erika has this amazing chair, which she calls her throne. Where do you get a piece? I have to ask, where do you get a piece
Okay.
like that?
Speaking of what sets me on fire, I am an avid Goodwill and thrifter, and I
Ah,
found this, I think, on at some like secondhand
so
place
cool.
like a few years ago. I am all about like finding, I swear, like for me, thrifting is like working with the universe and manifesting. So I'm always like,
Ah.
oh, just manifesting out there what I want. And then I go to these secondhand places and I seem to find a general sense of what I'm looking for, which is pretty cool. It's like a game to me, but I find it, I'm very passionate about it. And I feel on fire, like I'm actually connected to the vortex of life. I go thrifting and find stuff like this.
The
I'm like,
thrifting
I'm winning.
vortex. Yeah, the
The
thrifting
thrifting vortex.
vortex. That's cool. I mean, yeah, that's really neat. It's like somebody else's history kind of connects with you, and you're like, this piece needs to be mine. Do you have anything else that
Exactly.
you've recently grabbed from there, like that like the chair?
Yes. I right down, actually right now downstairs, my house looks like a hoarding situation because we're collecting furniture for potentially a new place, like a second home type place. And so we have been thrifting like crazy. And I have found the coolest stuff. I mean, people are like, this looks like it's from Anthropology. And I'm like, nope, it was $40 at Goodwill. Like this amazing velvet chair, which I'm digging that velvet chair right now. So that's probably my number one thing. But all the pieces, I'm just like obsessed.
That's so cool. I mean, I've had a lot of guests on. I've never talked about that topic before. That's really neat. That's neat. I'm now, you know what's going to happen now. Next time I drive by one, you're going to come to my mind, and I'm going to have to go in and see what kind of energy I feel and what calls my name out in there. Because I think of
Exactly. I really believe that thrifting can be part of our spiritual experience.
that's so cool. I mean, that's so awesome. I always think of going to a thrift store as like the clothing, and so I never really think about it as like furniture pieces or anything else like that. Like you that's really neat. Um,
Well, thank you.
yeah. So thanks for sharing that. So you just launched. I want to talk about this first and foremost. You just launched a brand new website,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
it's amazing. It's awesome. I was checking it out before our call. Curious question, business question. Um, did you have all that content already before on your old website, or did you like just blast all this out of there?
Okay. So Justin, 2020 has been this pregnancy and birthing for me. I've been generating content since January. And so all of that content on there, for the most part, is new this year.
Wow.
And it has been a journey. I can't quite tell you. So just so you guys know, I was formerly a nurse practitioner. So I come from the conventional medical world. and was there for almost a decade. And we could talk more about that in depth and what led me to more of this holistic mind, body medicine, energy.
I definitely want to know for sure.
Okay, cool. So we'll get there. Sorry, talking to me is like going on 10 different subjects. So feel free to bring me back anytime.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay. So my practice has been open for 2.5 years. And the first 2 years, it was really getting my teeth into like, where are my gifts? Like, where do I really want to focus my gifts to? Because really I can help anybody, right? Like when it comes to mind, body medicine, energy healing, and just being able to tap into your own healing potential, like you can help anybody, but where does it really shine? Who is really looking for my help? And this year I got a lot of clarity on that and the kind of space where my gifts shine.
Yeah.
And so it was really like this awakening for me. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And so literally this whole year has been focusing on creating this content, feeling like just going with the flow of life, of just being like, nope, I got to write about this. Nope, I got to make a course about that. Like, and spending all this time in this quarantine and this space where we've all been given space, whether we've chosen to take it or not, and really lean into that. So everything's pretty much brand new, which is like, it's exciting and it's scary and all the things.
Yeah. Well, you know what that reminds me of? I like to call it like your zone of genius. I mean, I didn't make that word up, right? Yeah.
Yes.
And how do you tap into that zone? Because obviously you're there right now. Because if you guys go to her site, you'll see, and most of the work you do is for women, correct?
It's actually for men and women. I only have one mastermind right now that's solely for women. So
Okay.
It really is for men and women. Yeah.
Okay, beautiful. So if you go on there, I mean, there's free content, there's courses, there's the mastermind, all kinds of stuff. So, you know, in order for you to cultivate that, I know how it is, right? I release meditations, I have the podcast, my internet marketing business. How do you suggest, or how are you tapping into that zone of genius, you know, that creativity zone? How do you get into that mode all year?
That's a fabulous question. So my secret sauce, kind of what I bring to the table, is this whole work of the subconscious being. You guys have heard of the subconscious mind, and that's part of the subconscious being. But I've come to find as a healer that we have this entire entity within ourselves that is what I call the subconscious being. And part of that is learning to listen to what I call our heart sense, and also learning how to listen to our gut sense. And I believe our heart sense contains our deepest desires, wants, and purpose, and that part within us. And then our gut sense is that pilot within us, that, or compass, however metaphorically you want to look at that, that's saying, no, this is exactly where you're meant to go. This is exactly what you're meant to do. And it's only you who knows what that is. And after coming out of a life where I did what I should have done for the first 30 years of my life and being no, screw it. I'm going to do what I know I'm meant to do. And as scary as that was, the more you can listen to those voices within yourself, the more you can get clarity on what's the right path for you, because nobody knows that but you. And it's learning how to mute the noise around you that does not serve you, to let in the noise that does serve you, and being able to integrate that into those voices within yourself that we've all learned so deeply how to ignore and silence. But it's learning how to turn that volume back up on it, and then have that trust within ourselves to go follow that.
Yeah. How do you, like, is someone able to figure that out? Do you believe if they're not, how do I say this in like the kindest way? So if you're not already, being, not very stressed, if you're already creating, doing things that make you happy, if you're not already doing these things, it's very hard to tap into what you're talking about. Right. So
Right.
How does somebody go about and release themselves? I saw on your website, like you can help people get from an 8 out of 10 stress level to a 0. I mean, that's a pretty bold statement, right?
It's a little bold, sure.
And I love it. Like, I love it. There was also something on there about how you can stop or avoid spending, you said at Rainer's site, years or thousands of dollars on medication, supplements, therapy to deal with anxiety, stress, and overwhelm. Wouldn't it be super amazing to have that? And I've said that myself, which, I'm an Enneagram 7. So
Yes,
wing,
fellow 7.
I can't remember my wing. I think it was a 6 or something, or maybe an 8.
I can see that.
I mean, you can only be an 8 or a 6. I think I was a 6. But anyway, but yeah, so I don't know too much about 8s, but I can totally see the 7 in you. Like, I mean, like just by your
Yes.
personality. So I had the Enneagram and Coffee
Yes,
person
I
on.
listened to that one.
Oh, okay.
Staircase. Yeah, I loved it.
Oh, cool. I'm so glad you listened. Thank you. Well, so where I was going with this is like, so what, how can you do that? How can somebody, I know it's like coming inside, finding yourself, right? I know meditation is is that like the number one path that you suggest? Is there something else that people can do to go from an 8 to a 6 to a 5 to you know what I mean? What
Yeah.
some tips?
So there's more than one way to skin a cat, right?
Yeah.
There's many ways, but what I do and what I do that's very unconventional. I don't teach. I do a lot of energetic visualization meditations. So my meditations are more active versus silent and being, although silence and stillness meditations are equally as important, and we need to make space for that. And I emphasize that with my clients. However, what prevents us from being in that space of calm, peace, and joy, which I believe is our natural state of being, by the way. I believe without all the layers that are acquired throughout our whole lives from trauma or bad situations or from faulty programming of whatever culture, society, or family structure we've been in, our natural state of our spirits is calm, peace, and joy. So my approach is what is getting in the way of that, and teaching people how to unlayer those different parts of their subconscious being. You're never going to find peace if you're always going against your purpose. You're never going to find peace if your inner child is really upset, which that's one of the subconscious being components is our inner children, which there's a spiritual principle that says every age of ourselves is still alive and well within us. Okay. So if that's the case, sometimes when I'm upset, it's really my 5-year-old self that's upset. Or sometimes when I'm sad, it's really my 14-year-old self that's upset. If we don't go there and address those parts of ourselves, they're always going to be banging on our door, asking to be seen and heard. If we don't feel our emotions, and that's where my biggest thing is, I'm an emotional health expert. If addressing our emotions, if we don't give them the space, the time, to be felt, the acknowledgement of them, the validation of them, they're going to be building up their energy bodies. And so if they're always building, if you don't feel them, think of them like energy spheres, that they're just going to keep building up and building up and building up in your body, and it's going to create energetic chaos. And so if you're not feeling your emotions, you don't go there to address your emotions, they're going to be there waiting to be felt. And so it's also going to that space of quiet to feel those emotions and deal with them and then release them. So I do it from these different spheres of the subconscious being. So the subconscious being is subconscious mind, that's the programs, inner child, and then going through heart sense, gut sense, and addressing all those different pieces, parts, and our emotions. Yeah. Okay. So I take it from this inner subconscious being perspective. And what I do, I'm very passionate about teaching people how to heal themselves. So what I do through my online coursework and one-to-one work is teaching people how to do this for themselves. Right. And going to those places that are very deep. And it's very vulnerable work. It's not exactly talking about the weather.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I understand. I totally understand mental health and the severity that it can take on, right? Mm-hmm. One of the things that I'm passionate about, and it sounds like you are too, is doing that vulnerable work first. Yeah. Right. Seeing where that's going to take you, seeing what you can, because it is scary. Like, and you really have to allow yourself to just surrender to it and everything you're saying. And I know just from personal experience, I know that. So when somebody is dealing with an emotional situation, do you suggest that they sit with it then and there and feel it, or like at the end of the day, kind of recap everything that happened that day and sit with it?
Yeah, that's a great question. It depends on what's going on, because sometimes if we're in the middle of a work meeting and we're feeling some emotions, like maybe there's not the safe space right then and there to like feel that, right?
Yeah. Did Erica just fall asleep over there in the corner? She's like closing her eyes and breathing.
Tears running down.
Yeah.
Like, are she okay? One of the techniques I teach clients is to stop, drop, and breathe. So, you know, if there's a fire, you stop, drop, and roll.
Yeah, that's what I thought of. Yeah.
Yeah. So you said you stop, drop, and breathe, where you stop what you're doing if you're able to. And if not, you make sure you have intention to go back to it at the next available time, or else you're going to keep putting it off and putting it off and putting it off. You drop into your body and you start breathing, becoming present to what's going on in your body, what's coming up, and bringing that awareness to feel what's happening so that you can release whatever's appropriate to release in that moment.
Yeah.
And it's so gray, right? It's never black and white. Like, this is when you can feel emotions and this is when you cannot. Like, sometimes it is not a safe space to feel emotions where you're in, but it's really important that we create space and time to feel emotions. One of the things I teach clients is to take an emotional time in every day. And you can practice this with your family too, where instead of everybody's like, well, what did you do today? Right? We're always so performance focused. Like, what did you do? Or how did you feel today? What did you feel today? How did I feel today? That's something my boyfriend and I actually got into a practice with. He's someone that was in the Army, did not connect to his emotions when I first met him very well. And we started practicing like emotional time ins. And it was amazing what you don't realize you feel in a day unless you slow down and you're like, wait, I did feel some kind of way about, you know, this that happened earlier. And then when you can process it, it's like, oh, and, you know, can let it go or work through what you need to work through on it.
Yeah. I think that's such a valuable lesson, what you just explained. You don't have kids right now?
No, I don't.
Okay. So I have a 5-year-old daughter and a 2-year-old son. And I was downstairs right before I jumped on with you. And my daughter was asking about help with playing music on the TV. And I was like, so how was your day today? Because I've been working most of the day and I work from home. So I was like, how was your day today? And she's like, it was really good. It's a good day, Dad. I did have a rough moment, though, she said to me at 5. Right. And
Yes.
her rough moment, a rough moment was when she was reading a book and my son came over and started bothering her and trying to take the book away. And she was like, no, I'm trying to read. And she was explaining the whole story. Right. And
Yes.
the reason I bring that up, because we do that, we try to say, you know, how is this? And then did you have any moments that were rough and what did you learn from them? And, you know, I think that it was earlier we practiced that in life, the more in touch, which you're saying, you can get in with your real emotions. Rather than like how I grew up, which is fine. I think most people grew up like that. Last generation was like, hey, toughen up, kid. Like, you're fine. You're fine. Don't worry about it. Everything's okay. Well, it's just, yeah, and move on. Right.
Right.
So we'll just see how we screw up our kids this generation and what they're going to have to teach their next generation.
I hear that. You know, here's my take on emotions too, is I really believe that emotions are the voices of our souls. And that is what allows us. Emotions are what allow us to experience ourselves. And all emotions are innocent and just telling us a story of what's going on in our souls. And with such, with that kind of attitude, right? Like we grew up with, and definitely I experienced a lot of the same of just like, you know, stop being ridiculous or like, or you shouldn't feel that way. And there was a lot of nurturance around certain emotions too, but there was also a lot of judgment around emotions depending on the situation. And really what that does is it completely shuts down the experience of us with ourselves. And that's when I tell people that, they're like, you know, it's like this very big philosophical statement, but I have found that to be true. Like that is how we experience ourselves, is through our emotions. And I also believe emotions are like their own system in our bodies. Like we have a circulatory system, we have a neurological system. I believe like emotions are their own system. And if we shut down our emotions, we're always shutting down a system within us that allows us to thrive. Like, what if we were doing that to other systems in our body? You know what I mean? So emotions are like kind of a big deal in my personal and professional opinion.
Yeah. And I mean, for guys, for males, and it's
Mm.
just like, it's a lot, I don't know how to say harder. I guess we're more wired to not become in touch with our emotions, right? So
Yeah, that's harder.
like you said, I mean, I just remember when somebody would get like, start to show too much love or start to get like icky emotionally, or that's what I used to call it, whatever, icky. I would start feeling, and I call it that because I would start feeling like uncomfortable, and I would push it away. And I realize now that that was me, like what you just said, like you just explained, I wasn't living truly my, that was,
Right.
you reminded me of that when you were explaining that. That's what I wanted to say.
Totally. And I'm so glad you brought that up about men and emotions, because a lot of my work is actually with men, like I was saying, in particular my one-to-one work. And I'm actually creating a mastermind next year for men, called Emotionally Available. And it's all about accessing those pieces and parts within ourselves, because men, it's not that you guys are less emotional, it's that you're taught not to feel. Right. And you're taught that that's what makes you a quote unquote real man. Right. And that is so not true. Like, men are just as emotional as women because they're just as human as women.
Right.
Like,
we just feel weaker. Like, coming from a male's perspective, like you literally, like, and again, it's obviously society and stuff that has this, that creates this, but like you feel weaker. Like you're supposed to be strong as a male.
Yeah.
Right. You're supposed to handle, be the rock. And when you tap in your emotions, you start to feel like, oh, now I'm being weak, and that's not how I'm supposed to be. And so it's
totally.
It's tough.
Right. And that's, I hear that, and that's totally valid. That's definitely been my male clients' experiences, my boyfriend's experience, because he say, I feel weak, because we have learned, and it's not true, but that feeling emotions equates weakness, as if we are supposed to control how we feel. But really, showing emotion, I truly believe, is the most vulnerable act as humans we can partake in. There's nothing more vulnerable than showing our authentic emotion, because I believe that's as deep as we can go. That's our soul speaking out, and you can't go deeper than your soul, right? So it's so vulnerable, but that, like Brene Brown talks about a lot and stuff, that vulnerability is our strength. And so I truly believe the more we can recognize, oh my gosh, no, that is so strong for us to be able to stand in our space and authentically express ourselves, the more that narrative is going to shift. Because, man, when I get male clients, dude, I mean, they come in and they sob and sob and sob because there's so much repressed emotion in there, and they finally feel safe where they're not going to be judged for feeling, and they don't know that they're feeling until they do. So but it is really hard, because there's not safe space technically in a lot of places for men to go there for themselves.
I mean, 100%. Like, and a lot of it, now that you're saying it, and I'm thinking about it, and people are listening to this conversation, I think of it as like the group of friends that you've had, or you always grew up with, right? Like, you probably, for most guys, none of us have seen each other cry, and if we have, we'd be like, dude, what are you doing, dude, like, what do you know what I mean? Like, that's right. And now, what does that mean? Yes. Does that mean that I have the wrong group of friends, or does it just mean that we're all on a different journey and a different path, and we're all working on different things, right? It's just a really interesting topic that you could talk about for hours, right? And I love that you have guys that come in there and just cry.
Oh, 4 hours.
One
Me too. I think it is so wonderful.
Yeah. Sorry, we have a delay. There's like one of us had a bad reception for a little bit, and that space there for about a minute, but
no worries. I think we're back on track.
Okay, good. So how did you, let's go back. Let's take a step back here on this journey, and we'll come back here. But I'm curious what led you to this, because Yeah, I am. I'm curious. What led you here? Was there a traumatic event? Was it just you
Oh yeah.
decided?
Yeah, no, this is great. So I grew up actually very sick, sick all the time. Was in and out of doctor's offices my whole childhood. A lot of recurring illnesses and undiagnosable autoimmune condition that they could never figure out. They thought it was lupus. It didn't test lupus, but like if you're presenting and they're thinking it might be lupus, you know you're in a bad way.
Mm.
So I had that, you know, you're in a bad way. But that's all I knew was being sick. And then in my teen years, I started developing gut issues. I started developing a lot of anxiety, a lot of obsessive thoughts. And I was very ashamed of it. And I was kind of like the rock. I was the good girl and the straight A student, the star athlete. So I'm an Enneagram 8 anyway. So I struggled with vulnerability. And I just kind of hid those parts of myself and kept it all together. And I went in, you know, I went off to college. I got into nursing and was a nurse for years and was having these health issues. They were kind of better in my 20s, not so much. They were better the whole time. And then around my mid 20s, I discovered more of a paleo primal diet. You know, you guys may have heard of that, and switched my diet over to eating predominantly this whole food diet. And my symptoms went away within 48 hours. And I was convinced nutrition is everything, which is a huge part of things. So I'm not here to say that it's not important. It is.
Sure.
But so I was in remission for 3 years. And then in my late 20s, I was in grad school at Georgetown for my nurse practitioners. I was married and we were starting to go through some stress. He was in medical school. And all of a sudden my autoimmune condition came back with a vengeance. And I was the star patient. I was exercising what would be considered like perfectly. I was eating perfectly. And the crazy thing was my blood work was perfect. Like I went to the doctors and they're like, your blood work, I wish my patients had your blood work. Well, and I'm like, well, clearly something's terribly wrong. My hair was falling out. I had rashes, random rashes all over my body. I would get stiffness, like just like some weird aches and pains in my body. My gut was just all kinds of wackadoo. So it was like, something is wrong and there's something I don't know about and I need to figure it out. I'm not someone that's just okay with things being not okay. So I was like, I will figure this out. It was in 2016. I was doing a rotation in California, and the nurse practitioner I was following was like, hey, you know those patients where where something's not okay, but everything's okay, but it's not okay? And I'm like, yeah, I do know those patients because I'm one of them, right? And she was like, well, I go into this book and I look at this thing and it was Louise Hay's You Can Heal Your Life. And Louise Hay, for anybody who know Lulu, may she rest in peace, she was a major mindfulness teacher throughout decades, and love her. But anyway, she talked about emotional imbalance showing up in the body. And nobody had ever taught me about that. And I was a psych nurse for years. Like I worked in mental health and nobody once mentioned how your emotional state and spiritual state can influence your body. And my mind was blown. So I started reading this and seeing how certain things pertain to me. Like, you know, shoulder rounding and shoulder issues was like carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders. I carried everybody's load and I knew it too. And I'm like, no wonder my shoulders at the time were so hunched over. Like it's such an energetic thing. And I was reading stuff about my ex-husband. I'll tell you how we'll get there. And so, because you're all like, wait, she had a husband and now she doesn't. So I was starting putting all these pieces together and how things were so on point for him and how things were so on point for my mom. And it just opened up this Pandora's box, but it allowed me to start going inward for myself and realizing it was a year of unraveling. Unraveling emotions I didn't realize I had, the anger that I had, the anxiety, what was behind my anxiety and my fear, and why did I always work so hard? Why was I such a perfectionist? Like I started asking a bunch of whys And that went down the rabbit hole, let me tell you. But let me tell you the other thing. When I started answering the whys, why I felt the way I felt, emotionally, why I was working so hard and hustling for my worth, essentially. And I'm realizing that I was in not the right marriage for me. That was a big wake up. Hello. I was married to a good person, but it was trying to make a friendship into a marriage, essentially, and had been the whole time. I woke up to myself and ended up leaving my marriage. And then subsequently, what was tugging at my heart is you are not meant to be in conventional medicine. Not that I have anything against conventional medicine. Everything has its place. Yeah. But waking up to all my symptoms were getting better. Like my autoimmune stuff was starting to go away as I addressed these emotions, and I addressed the misalignments in my life. All this time, my body was telling me, you're going the wrong way. You're going the wrong way. This isn't in alignment with you. This is toxic for you. This is this for you. All it was doing was telling me a story. So when I started listening to my body, instead of being mad at it and like, why are you so dysfunctional? No, it was doing exactly what it was supposed to do the whole time. And when I started making those huge shifts in my life and also listening to my heart that, no, I'm meant to do something outside of conventional medicine, but still be a healer. It was at that point, all the autoimmune stuff went away. All the gut stuff went away. And I've been 3 years now without any of these issues.
Are you still on the paleo?
So it drove me to go. I'm, for the most part, yes. My body does like whole nutrition. So I stick to a lot of veggies. People think I'm vegetarian. I do eat some meat, but I try to keep things like whole, quality, non-processed. So it helps, but it definitely woke me up when nutrition and exercise weren't, but like, again, it was showing me that there's this whole other component. So I'm very much into exercising. I'm very much into nutrition. Like your body needs proper fuel, people, for sure. Yeah. But we also have to fill up our soul tanks. We all have soul tanks. And if they're running on empty, you're going to know for sure.
Yeah, that was all beautiful. Thank you for sharing your story, your history, your relationship. It just reminds me of a couple people that I know. Actually, my trainer, I have a trainer, and she has an autoimmune situation happening, and her lupus runs in her family. I found this out like a week ago, right? And then you're just talking about it, and it's just really interesting. So you're feeding your soul, your mind, your body, all of that balance, right? It's all about the balance. Whereas I think a lot of people push one thing a lot, and then it just, I don't know, like really focus on just health, and they forget about their emotions and their exercise, and they're just focusing on food. I don't know, you know what I mean? So you're talking balance.
Yes, it's all about balance. I would think there's been a lot of clients I've had over the past several years that have been those ideal patients.
Yeah.
They've done all the things.
Well, let me ask you this. So when it comes to balance, when it comes to working with people, everybody's tailored differently, right? So like, for example, a few years ago, I thought if I didn't go to the gym on a certain day, I was miserable. Right. So I'm like, I think we all have gone through that if we've ever exercised. And, I had to come to terms with like, why am I doing that to myself? Like, what is so important about me going to the gym that is ruining my entire day if I don't go?
Yes.
And that's that why, like you were saying, like, why do I feel that way? Why am I doing that? For you, what is like that sweet spot for exercise?
That's a great question. For me, I used to be an athlete, and I used to do CrossFit and all the things, which they're all great, by the way, again. But my body, it's a lot for me listening to my body anymore versus what I think I should be doing. I recently found out, I actually had been battling fatigue for the last few years, and only come out recently to find out that I was anemic. And it had to do with a gut imbalance, which I just got taken care of. So functional medicine is fabulous if y'all haven't done some functional medicine. And I truly believe everybody should get their stool tested. I know it's like we're talking about poop now. Should get their poop tested every few years and see like how the balance in your gut is.
So what are you taking right now that helped balance it, you personally?
I killed off all the bad bacteria that was in my gut and taking prescription grade probiotics, and the anemia is fixing itself because now my body can absorb the nutrients properly to build blood.
Oh, they had prescription grade probiotics?
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah,
I'm
you can
taking
like at the pharmacy.
I didn't even know that you can get prescription. I had no idea. I'm taking some spore-based ones. I'd imagine the prescription ones are probably better.
Yes. Well, they're certainly heavy duty as far as like the amount of colonization and stuff like that. So what that means though, like gut health, you know, again, this is about the balance, right? Like you need to also address how the balance is in your gut, because that's what balances your hormones. That's what allows you to absorb nutrients properly. So my body wasn't absorbing nutrients. So I've been very tired the last 2 years, and I thought it's just because I was doing a lot of healing and building a business. And I got to a point where I'm like, no, this is beyond that. And so luckily I listened to my body and sought help there after a while and was like, okay, yeah. But my point being is that I was only doing like light exercises, like listening to my body. My body's like, you can't handle the harder stuff right now, which was very hard for me because I like a good challenge. I'm the challenger on the Enneagram. I like a good challenge. And, but now that I'm getting my energy back, it's like, I will listen to my body day by day, where it's like, there's some days I'm like, yesterday I wanted to go for a run. So I went for a run. And today I want to go do a boot camp workout with friends. So, social distancing, of course. And so I'm going to go do that. And then other days I'm like, you know what? I just want to do yoga. So I'm very much like intuitively listening to what my body wants to do and how it wants to move and needs to move. That's how I figure out the balance.
Yeah. So for you guys listening, some people might be thinking, because I'm kind of having some intuition here, like, holy cow, this seems like a lot of stuff. Okay. But I want to, here's why I believe that it sounds like it is, but once you just put this into practice in your life and the balance starts occurring, because I'm a picture perfect example over the last 2 years of going through this process. It actually creates way more space in your life for other things. The chaos slows down, the health issues slow down, the stress slows down, and it just creates like, holy cow, is this what I've been missing out on for the last X amount of years? And it's just that little bit of work of putting these pieces in place to balance yourself out that actually is like, if you put your focus there, that's actually more beneficial than avoiding it and trying to just do other things, I guess you could say.
No, you're totally right on that. And like Rome wasn't built in a day, right? So we don't get all these things figured out one day, and healing, mind, body, and spirit. It takes intention, and it does take time and parts, investments, and whatever you need to do, right? To go to those places in healing. And we need help. We got to bring people in that can help us a lot of the time. But for me, what I tell people, because a lot of people are like, where do I begin? Like, I don't eat right. I suppress my emotions. I
get it.
All the things, right?
Yeah.
Or I don't exercise. And
I feel like I don't have time for anything on top of all that. I don't have
time. Exactly. And so what I tell people is, intuitively, where do you feel like you can start successfully? Like, where can you start successfully? If it's so much as, I'm going to get out of the house and walk for 30 minutes a day, like, just start there. Like, that's obtainable. That's healthy. Like, start where you feel like you can. For a lot of people, like doing emotional work, start with maybe doing an online course or something simple, and then working more simple. That's more DIY. That's more on your time. And then working your way up to seeing someone one-on-one. It's all about taking the baby steps that start to lead you down the path. It's more important to start down the path than to try to jump to a certain point on a path and then it's too much, and so you bail on the path completely.
Right. Yeah. That's such great advice. It's kind of like, how many people actually go from going to the gym 0 days a week to 7 days a week? That
exactly.
jump. there's no, like, if you could find me one person through 2 years of research, there's just no way.
Yeah, exactly.
But there's plenty of people that go from 0 to 1 day to 2 days to three
Yeah.
days. And this is just a small example, right? So that's great advice for those listening and wanting to add some more things. And one of the things I just noticed myself saying, add something else to your life. You mentioned earlier, like taking things away, creating space. It sounds like you have figured out like what actions and what daily activities or whatever make you happy, right? So what are like your 3 things that you like, just that you do every day that just make you're going to be happy doing?
Oh, yes. For me, one is definitely being outside. Like nature is just, we are divinely connected to nature, and it
Yeah.
works for us in ways that are very mysterious and that we don't understand, but there's a lot of things we do understand too. But just even the noises of nature, science has shown that it lowers our sympathetic nervous system. Just hearing wind and water and birds, like it lowers our, which sympathetic nervous system is fight or flight. And so we have 2 separate nervous systems, the rest and digest, the autonomic, and then sympathetic, which is fight or flight. So we can lower that nervous system, heighten our autonomic nervous system by listening to the sounds in nature, grounding with our bare feet on the bare earth, actually jumpstarts our detox pathways in our body. Science has proven that. This is not some hippy dippy whatever. So nature is really, really important. I need to be outdoors and getting a little sunlight and just experiencing that, because we are meant to be outside. Like part of our sickness is we're not outside enough. Another thing for me that brings me joy, I have to have authentic conversations with people like you and I are having right now. It brings me so much joy. Like I need to connect to people. And I have a wonderful job that in my career, all I do is have deep soul, mind-blowing conversations with people all the time. Like that's my career. And I get that all the time. And so I can't do superficial very well. I was not the best at dating when I was single, because I was just like, do you know about Brene Brown and what's your Enneagram type? And they're just like, okay. So it's like, just I need that depth. I need authentic connection. And that brings me a lot of
And they're like, what?
yeah, I had a lot of first dates. So, all good though, all good. But I need authentic depth and connection. And I'm trying to, so that's another thing that brings me joy. And then that just intentional, I would say intentional decisions bring me a lot of joy. For example, the thrifting, like intentional creation, I think is the word I'm looking for. Like where I'm creating things intentionally, that brings me a lot of joy. So thrifting is definitely part of that.
Yeah.
Or if I'm intentionally buying like local farm vegetables and animals that were humanely raised in my meal, like I feel like I've contributed to the betterment of the world.
I see.
It's those mindful creations. Like I created a mindful meal. I bought this chair and salvaged it from a junkyard somewhere. You know what I mean? Like that is when we step into that space of living intentionally, at least it's been my experience, that it really elevates my soul and then my experience of joy.
Yeah, you didn't squish that bug that was in the house. You gently picked it up and let it outside.
Yes, I've been doing that lately. Even the cockroaches. I'm like, cup. There's a cup and there's a plate. And I've gotten really good at not touching them, but I let them out. Like, not squishing them and just letting life be. So
and we can't forget, obviously, rubbing your cats and scratching your cats is probably up there on the happy things to do for yourself. So when and you can tell, like, so for anybody listening, like when you get off this podcast, like that's something great you can do. Like write down everything that just makes you happy. And you'll realize these things that you aren't doing, like you're avoiding doing throughout. I know, because I did this exercise, and that's why I wanted to ask you, because it kind of just came up organically here. And you'll realize, and then when you implement more of those happy things in your life, it'll push the other stuff away and allow you to be able to add things.
Oh, absolutely.
So that's a really cool little workshop thing to do. So yeah, that's cool. Thank you for sharing that. I love the intentional thing. Like that I know what you mean, because when I do that, I feel it. So I'm going to actually add that to my things to do more often. So thank you for that.
Absolutely. Yeah, I like to ask myself this question. Again, it goes back to really being mindful about every choice we make, but asking that question in the morning, what's going to serve me? Like, what's going to serve me? And not just what's going to serve me, what's going to serve my greater healing? Like, is it serving me? And then also, is it serving my greater healing, the heightening of my vibration as myself?
Yeah.
And when we can ask that question, that makes some things that we would normally do, or when we're on autopilot, it really challenges it.
Yeah. And then you'll see yourself like, oh, I'm starting to operate on autopilot, and you'll slow down, take a step back. How about is it your boyfriend now? Not your.
Yes.
Yeah. So, he has you in his life, which, you know, you are obviously on like an amazing journey, amazing path, and feeding your soul. Like for some people that can be overwhelming. How do you guys, if you don't mind me asking,
Oh no.
how do you guys mesh? How do you guys find that sweet spot together? So it's not like, slow down, why are you always talking about this? Or you know what I mean?
Oh my goodness, that's a fabulous question, and I love that you're asking it, because we will have been together a year next month, so it'll be a year next month. And when I met my boyfriend, he had not done any work. Like briefly had done some work. He just did a transcendental meditation course, but it was his first introduction to any kind of really spirituality and going inward more for himself. But then he met me, and on our first date, he ended up crying. And I have this reputation of making grown men cry. So he was like, what is happening right now? And I'm like, and I was crying too. I'm like, I don't know, we're feeling. And I was for certain that was going to be our only date. But then he's like, so when can I see you again? And I was like, what? I wasn't used to that.
Sure.
So for us, oh my goodness, it has been a journey through the cosmos, because so much of us coming together has brought up a lot of old crap, for both of us. And it's this intentional space of working through that together and not losing sight of each other along the way.
Right.
Like not losing sight of who's on the other side of that. Like, is this, who is this person on the other side? Because when we get triggered in our stuff, like we can easily forget who's on the other side, because we're in trauma. Whenever you're triggered, you're in trauma, and you're all about protection. It's all about protection. It's all about survival.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's not about necessarily coming to that sweet space together when you're triggered, right?
Now, when you say triggered, is that, would you say you're triggered when all of a sudden you get angry and start getting defensive? Is that being triggered?
Yeah, that could be one way it shows up, right? It could show up as like a quiet trigger where you're like, you're feeling something, but you're feeling very disconnected from your partner. And it could show up, but it usually shows up as like anger, defensiveness. It could show up as scared. It can show up as anything that requires you to feel like you're not safe.
Yeah.
And that means emotionally safe more so than anything else. And so for us, it's been like, is it safe to love each other this much? Is it safe to be this vulnerable, right?
Right.
And for us, and it has not been always easy for him, for either of us, but especially him, because he's had to think about things for himself, and going through that, those layers for himself and inward, faster than most humans possibly can. But luckily he's an Enneagram 2 with a 3 wing. So he's the helper with the achiever. So he likes achieving. And so the more enlightened he becomes, he's like, I'm achieving.
That's great. That's so good.
But it has not been easy.
You're like date number two. Date number 2. We're going to figure out your Enneagram. Here's the book. Let's figure this test.
It was date number 2.
I love it. I love it.
It really was. I knew by the end of the first week of seeing each other, he was Enneagram 2 3 wing. It was like required.
Love it.
So, yeah.
Oh my gosh.
But
yeah, Yeah, I interrupted you. Sorry, I had to. It was good.
No, absolutely. And that's exactly how it went. So for people who are living intentional relationships, you guys, they're not easy. Like, it's the most rewarding, beautiful thing in the world, but it's also not easy because you're going deep with each other. Like, there's no hiding. And when you're going through those layers with one another, it's learning about how to do it gracefully and in love and connection. But even in love and connection, it can get really messy. So it's like journeying in those layers together and making a decision, like, do we want to go there together or do we not? And it really is a choice.
Yeah.
It really is a choice. But intentional relationships, because the last relationships, that I've had in my past, it wasn't that showing up deep together. It wasn't that going in together and being like, I'm going with you. It was a very different experience. So this one, it's intense. It's intense, but it's so beautiful.
I love it. I love it. You shared a lot today, Erika. This was a very delightful, brilliant, we'll use the word cosmic conversation.
Cosmic.
There's a lot of wisdom dropped.
Oh, good.
And I'll ask you, I want to ask you this. So if you could go back to your 18-year-old self and give her any advice, what would you say to her?
Ooh, that's great. So my 18-year-old self, who was in heavy patterns of perfectionism and thought that, to be a certain person was what I had to do to be loved and accepted, and be this straight A student and be, all put together and pretty in a certain way, is just to let her know how freaking awesome she is. And there's nothing she has to do to be awesome. Like, it's great if she looks a certain way or whatever, and that's fine. And that's amazing that she's so capable of receiving straight A's and so capable of being athletic and this and that, but that she doesn't have to do anything to be loved, and that her emotions are valid. That's another thing I would tell her too, is that she's awesome and her emotions are valid. Like, whatever she felt at that time was totally valid. Not crazy.
Yeah. And I think, just to play off of that, Erika, for any husbands listening, I think that's one of the biggest lessons I'm learning still is, my spouse's emotions that she has at any time for anything that's totally valid. Like, it's not my job to say, you shouldn't be feeling that way right now.
That is brilliant. Yes, it is.
That's the first thing I thought of when you said that. You would say that to your 18-year-old self. So that's totally amazing. Thank you for sharing. And where can people work with you? How is it right directly on your site? Is what you recommend to go to? Instagram? What do you suggest?
Thank you. Yeah. So my business, luckily my wellness practice is remote. So you can be anywhere in the world and I can help you. So you go to erikashepard.com. That's Erika with a K, and that's SHEPARD, Shepard.com. And I have many ways you can work with me. You can work with me with my complimentary healings that I have on there. I also have a free meditation on there. I have online courses, that a slew of them. And then I also have my one-to-one work and my masterminds, which are both taking applicants for the next round, which spaces are very limited. So if you're interested in one-to-one work or my Rehab for Good Girls mastermind, and then also for men out there, if you're listening and you want to do emotionally available, I'm taking applicants. That'll be next year. So sweet. All the things.
I love it. Thank you for so much for what you do and how you're affecting the world and taking people, changing their stress levels and emotionally healing them. I love it all. It's beautiful. And thank you for being on here today, Erika. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, and thank you for doing what you do and making more a mindful impact, right?
Thanks. All right, I'll stop it.